Hello, fabulous listeners. Thanks for tuning in to Old Bodies Outside. This is your host, Brian Peterson. This episode's guest is Elizabeth Scott, who is an educator, psychotherapist, and the co-founder of The Body Positive, which is a nonprofit organization focused on eating disorders prevention. Elizabeth's work focuses on the intersection of embodiment, social justice, and mindfulness. At The Body Positive, she also serves as the director of training, and she teaches people to listen to their bodies, learn, and thrive with the ultimate goal to end harmful consequences of disrupted embodiment, such as eating disorders, depression, anxiety, cutting, suicide, substance abuse, and relationship violence. She instructs treatment professionals, educators, and students to use the Be Body Positive model to transform people's relationships with their bodies so that they are free from body dissatisfaction so they can be mobilized and do good for the world. You can check out more about The Body Positive at thebodypositive.org. Elizabeth, it's a pleasure to have you on Old Bodies Outside.
Thank you so much, Brian, for having me. I'm excited about this new podcast.
Yeah. Well, thank you. Thanks for joining us. And so let's hear a little bit about The Body Positive. And one of the first things I just want to know is, where's The Body Positive located?
Right. And it's a question of place that we want to know. But now that everything is digital, so much people don't even talk about location anymore. It's kind of a strange, dislocated world we live in. The Body Positive is located in Berkeley. I'm in Santa Cruz, California, about 75 miles south of there. And we all connect through Zoom, so we are really located everywhere in the world where you can have the internet.
Yeah. Well, kind of similarly with the podcast, it's something that is just wonderful because I get to connect with guests from all over the place, and it's wonderful that we get to connect from. I'm in Kansas, you're in California, so it's great that we have this virtual technology that we can use to do this.
I'm so grateful for it. It's been a great to be able to forward the mission of The Body Positive around the world, to reach a much wider audience.
Yeah, I'm sure. And so what other countries have you been working with other people with The Body Positive?
I was recently consulting with a Body Positive facilitator who is in Constantinople.
Wow.
And I worked with a woman who brought The Body Positive to her group of women with disabilities living in Nepal. She took our online training, again, completely all online, and got the curriculum and was teaching it in this very interesting community of women about how to love and accept their bodies with their disabilities.
Nice. That's fantastic. Well, I'm glad that you're able to spread your mission internationally and help people out internationally so they can be mobilized and do great stuff for the world. So that's fantastic. And so kind of continuing on about The Body Positive, when did The Body Positive start and what was the founding story?
Well, Connie had ideas all the way back in 1996. She lost a sister to an eating disorder. She had suffered from an eating disorder herself, and she had a young child when I met her. Her daughter Carmen was 3. And she was wanting to mobilize the world to transform it so that her daughter would not suffer in the ways that she and her sister had. And to do something in honor of her sister, Stephanie, in order to show that some benefit could come out of all of the loss she had experienced. So Connie reached out to me. I was a therapist working in an office in Marin County and seeing a lot of girls and women with eating disorders. And Connie said, I want to change the world, and I want to do it by teaching young people to take on this issue of body dissatisfaction themselves and change their peers. And I said, that makes sense to me. I believe in student leadership. I think that's a powerful way to make change, and I'll help. And so we, right then in 1998, started running groups in high schools and training leaders everywhere we went. So I remember one day early on, we had trained these girls maybe for like 8 hours. We had one day of training, and I dragged this one of them who was a freshman in high school to speak to a whole group of middle school kids. And it was very difficult, and I had a cold and I was losing my voice, and there were 300 of them, and we were talking about bodies, and they were very anxious and fidgety and loud, and the teachers weren't helping us. They were just sort of like, yeah, how are you going to handle this? And I turned to her and I said, please help me. I'm losing my voice and we're losing this audience. And I just thought, what is she going to do? And she started, you know, it's like, well, and I just thought, oh no, this isn't going to go well. And she just said, we're talking about radical self-love, people, loving your bodies. It's a beautiful way to change your whole life. And the whole group of 300 middle school kids was silent, and they were just riveted on her. And I thought, chopped liver grown-ups, we need to have the young people speaking to each other in the language that resonates with them. And that way will transform the world.
Yeah, I feel like that's probably that out of my preparations for conversing with you today, I feel like that was a central tenet of the body positive is those conversations with peers.
Yeah, it really makes a difference because the folks who are taking our fundamentals or our facilitator training and getting our curriculum and teaching it to their peers, they're the ones who are going to be the most transformed. But then there's their peers that they're going to reach with our message of cultivating self-love and all the other messages we'll talk about today. And that's going to multiply their efforts, right? And so they'll start to actually change the social conditions that lead to disruptions in embodiment, like eating disorders in the first place, and in the process transforming themselves, which is the goal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I wanted to ask you about that, the social aspects and the social constructs and those social rules that exist that just are really, really just big barriers. And so I wanted to know, like, what are the cultural contributions to eating disorders and disrupted embodiment?
Well, that's really where we started 20 years ago, 25 now, was to say ask the kids, just to put it more simply, what messages do you get about your food and your body, and how do they make you feel? So really, just starting with young kids, it's just good to ask questions. So what are the messages? And who do they come from? Is it your doctor? Is it the media? Is it your best friend? Like, where are these messages coming from that lead to you feeling uncomfortable with your body? Feeling like you're too big, too loud, take up too much space, have too much of an appetite, right? Too many needs, too many demands, right? Where do these messages come from? You're not feminine enough. You're not masculine enough. You don't comply. And I would say to kids to teach them these complex ideas about society and the messages and the way we internalize it and, interesting feminist psychoanalytic ideas. A simpler way is just to ask, what do they call you when you love your body? What do they call you when you enjoy your food? What do they call you when you take up space comfortably in your body? And the kids would respond, slut, greedy, selfish, conceited. And so I would teach them what they call you when you misbehave. That's how social rules are enforced. So you don't have to think of it in a complex sociological way. You can just say, what did they call you? Because what they call you is how they keep you in line. Don't be too big, not too passionate, not too desirous, especially for girls. We are not supposed to take up that much space. We're not supposed to move. We're not supposed to enjoy being physical in the environment. By 6th grade, girls move right off of the playground to the chairs. Their clothes aren't right. They can't run and play anymore. They need to be talking. They need to be still. So the messages are not too much appetite and don't move too much if you want to be feminine. And all the girls figure that out somewhere between middle school and high school. And that's where eating disorders are the most at risk.
Wow, wow, those messages just really, I feel like, make people live up to other people's approval versus their self-love approval.
Well, that's right. Well, and it teaches them to disconnect from their body and starting at this very primitive level of hunger, right? It's very basic. Hunger signals are loud, right? That's like our first oral stage of development. Remember Freud? And so hunger signals are loud. And satiety, oh, now I'm satisfied. That's like our basic managing our bodies. Our basic self-care is knowing when we're hungry, knowing when we're satisfied. Like that's what the infant is trying to figure out, right? And so if we teach girls or boys or whoever's getting on restrictive diets and trying to transform their body, make it into something other than what their ancestors would have them be, then we have them cutting off from a really loud primitive bodily signal. And if they do that effectively, which so many dieters do, how are you going to know subtle things like what am I interested in studying, or is it safe to get in the car with that guy, or what do I want to do that's creative, right? There's more subtle signals are also lost in that dissociative relationship to the body. And it starts by cutting off the signals of hunger and satiety, movement and rest. When do you want to move? When do you want to rest? Well, the rules are you don't move too much. You sit on the side and talk gossip with the girls. You don't go out there and play football.
Yeah, you brought up the ancestral past, and I wanted to know if you can kind of expand on that. I mean, where we, as Brian, who I am today, is so rooted so far back, and my body shape, my size is rooted so far back, and I wanted to kind of hear your thoughts about that ancestral component.
Right, and another way to talk about this is health at every size, which is this idea that our bodies are diverse in our size and shape based on our ancestral history, right? And so I like to think of teaching that my body and your body has been produced through hundreds and hundreds of generations of successful ancestors, right? So my two parents, my four grandparents, my eight great grandparents, my 16, it just goes on so exponentially behind me, are ancestors who all survived. Not one of them did not make it to childbearing age. All of them survived. So my body is this amazing production of success of hundreds of thousands of ancestors that go back and eventually meet your original ancestors, right? In Africa, our original ancestors. But we all survived. Every one of them got up in the tree before the saber-toothed tiger got there, survived the famine in Turkey or wherever our people lived, right? So if we could think about our bodies as an incredible gift from our ancestors, and it might not have been 100,000 lifetimes ago, it might have just been maybe 4 generations ago, your ancestors were slaves and they survived slavery, right? Maybe they were enslaved people who got free in 2 generations ago, right? In the South. And so just to recognize my size and my shape are based on what worked best for those ancestors, right? They were maybe we gain weight easily in my genetics because my ancestors lived in incredibly hard circumstances. So whenever they came across some food, their body would hold on to it in the form of fat, like so they had lower metabolic rates. So maybe my roundness, if I was very round, is based on incredible survival skills, amazing genetic capacities of my ancestors. So, and if I'm tall or short or blue-eyed or black-skinned or brown-skinned, just to recognize my body is my ancestors. So to try to honor them with how I live in my body and stay connected to them so I can feel connected to this earth that we all come from, right? That I didn't just arrive here, just out of space.
Yeah, and that's such a positive message, this production of success. We
Right.
are here because of all those successes and
Endless. And even with
endless,
all my
yeah.
flaws and imperfections, like with this illness and that bad knee and like whatever the flaws are in my body, it's still an amazing product. And here I've lived all the way to 64. Many of my ancestors never made it past 22, right? Because the circumstances were so difficult. But what luck to have inherited such a fabulous constitution, to live this long, right?
Yeah. What if you're already making my perspective flip? Just thinking about that. I've never thought about that for myself. And that's empowering.
And I really try to embody it. I
Yeah.
lost my mother last summer at 93. And to embody her strength and power, I feel like right now, she looks out of my eyes, right? She's alive in me.
Yeah.
She looks out of my eyes. My strength and vitality. That's my mother's strength and vitality. My sense of humor, my joy, my blue eyes. It's like all this is my mother expressing herself. She lives on. But so do all those other ancestors that I never even met. So this bony part of my elbow, that might have been my great uncle in Norway, right? 4 generations ago, or 5 or 6, right? Or some Viking dude, who knows, right?
Yeah.
But to recognize that they're all alive right now in my body. They're not just like dead. They're here being expressed through my DNA,
Yeah. Yeah.
just
That's
like a
so.
plant.
Yeah, it is like a plant, and it's a really beautiful way to have your like to perceive your embodiment.
And you can carry it on as I age, like Connie has introduced this so much in her work, my partner at the Body Positive, that she says like this wrinkled up place on my arm, she'll take pictures of it next to an old tree bark, and she'll say, look, it looks the same. It's like as I age and transform, so does this tree. Why am I supposed to look like a young, symmetrical, smooth-skinned 20-year-old when I'm 64? Like, how does that make sense? Of course, my body is going to change like landscape does, like rocks and trees and plants do. And it's going to age and eventually, fall apart and turn to dust. And so why not inhabit that and see the beauty of it rather than being caught up with, a marketing ideal of how we're supposed to look, which is based on promoting dissatisfaction so that something could be sold to us.
And I feel like those marketing schemes of promoting dissatisfaction is directly related to people alienating their own wants and desires. And that was something I did want
Exactly.
to. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so, how does that kind of work?
Well, I think that people who are alienated from their wants and desires, again, starting at this very primitive level of, am I hungry? Am I satisfied? Do I need to rest? Do I need to move? Like these very basic levels. Am I safe? Right? So for a lot of people, they are in environments where there's a lot of danger and aggression. So they're focused just on, am I safe? Which is even before hunger and satiety and rest and activity, right? So these basic levels, if we repress those, where you can't tell when you're hungry, it doesn't matter when you're satisfied because that's not important. You shouldn't move when you need to move. You shouldn't rest when you need to rest. There's work that needs to get done. Safety is something that you should cultivate from inside. You shouldn't be addressing the conditions of your life where there's violence or alienation or where things are dangerous or unsafe or disconnected, right? You should be just working on that personally. It's your own personal growth. You shouldn't address the problems in your environment like racism or somebody who doesn't recognize that you have a disability and be able to respond to that or whatever the conditions are. Then we become really separated from our truth. And people who are separated from their truth are easy to dominate. You can make them buy what you want to buy, vote for who you want to vote for, listen to the pedagogy of what they want to teach you, because they're not connecting. Like, I'm not hungry for that. I've had enough of that. They've learned to doubt, always doubt. So I've had girls in recovery for eating disorders where I've asked them for a year, what are you feeling? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Because they've learned from being polite and good and thin and quiet and obedient and clean and fresh and nice their whole life, they have completely disconnected from anything about what their body is signaling, otherwise known as your intuition, your gut.
Yeah, and I feel like with a lot of the modern dieting schemes, it just promotes more of that disconnection. And so like
It does.
how does the body positives approach differ from that kind of restrictive or prescriptive set of rules to follow?
So it's radically the opposite. So the body positive approach is Listen to your body. So at a very primitive level, are you safe? What are the conditions of your life that lead to violations and intrusions like don't wear that, or come here, your body is for me to take what I want from? What kinds of experiences are you having of sexual harassment or of violence or of a constant criticizing of your body that are leading you to disconnect? And how can you, with support from me, from the group, from the body positive community you build, start pushing out a little space in your life to listen inside to your own hunger and satiety, your own desires and passions, what really matters to you. So the body positive, why is it not prescriptive? Because we don't tell people what to do because we don't know what they need. It's so personal, right? What we do is ask questions. So starting with what messages are you getting? How do they make you feel? What are you going to do about it? How can I help, right? So helping them to identify, yeah, I need to be smaller in size than I naturally am. And so I have to be constantly restricting my food. So I'm constantly hungry. And then a part of me that's very angry and frustrated has me binging on food. And so then I have this really out of control cycling of my eating and my weight because it's so disconnected from eating when you're hungry, satisfying what your body needs, and stopping when you're satisfied. And then your body will settle at its own natural weight, which probably won't be the ideal of beauty in this society, because that ideal, only about 3% of us look like that naturally. And the rest of us are old or fatter or thinner or something, we don't have the right attributes, whatever. So part of it is learning to eat intuitively, take care of ourselves through our own process of inquiry, figuring out like what works for me. And the other part is then fighting for a little space in the world to be who we are, the size and shape we are, the personality we are, the race we are, the, whatever, whoever we are. Maybe we're neurodivergent and we need a little space to be able to do our test on a pencil and paper because looking at a screen makes us, neurologically disturbed. So who knows? Depends on the individual.
Yeah, right. And I guess, with each individual, they have internalized societal messaging differently and probably created a unique critical inner voice that, can
Right.
go in a lot of directions.
Right. Right. And the critical voice is, the body positive has 5 competencies that we've discovered through that process of asking kids questions about what the messages are. We learn from them what are the main 5 ideas that if you have them and you're solid in them, you will be resilient against body hatred and eating disorders. So that's where our model came from, was just through grassroots organizing, listening, and then reflecting back to them and saying, is it this? And they're like, yes. When I have that, then I feel clear. And one of them is what you just brought up. It's around cultivating self-love, which is about how do we relate to what I refer to as internalized oppression, but you might call it the critical voice, right? So how do we relate to what we've internalized that's aggressive, that now we think is our own voice, and then we're endlessly repeating this nasty message to ourselves. You're too big, you're too fat, you're not enough, you're not enough. And how do we relate to that part of ourselves? Because it's not by telling it, get out. That's not how we relate to it.
No, no. And so part of this be body positive model, what are the other, so you listed off cultivate self love and just kind of giving
That's
that
one of them.
explanation. And so what are the
Mhm.
other 4 competencies?
So the first one is reclaim health, and that's how we think about our bodies and our food and the way we are in the world. And we talked a little bit about that in terms of recognizing our ancestors and recognizing that the size and shape of our bodies and the ways we develop and move and communicate and so much is genetically programmed. And then there's some percentage about how we take care of ourselves and how we feel in the world that also can affect our bodies. So it's just coming to realize how important our ancestors as they show up in our bodies are, which is to defines a lot of who we are, and to come to defend and trust them and allow their aliveness and expression in our bodies. And the way we do that is by helping people with their body story. So learning to really tell your body story from your earliest memory of what messages you got and to now, and how has your body story changed as you've developed, and what has it developed into? And if it's developed into a miserable place to live with a really disrupted relationship to eating and food and rest and relationship and self-care, how can you transform that? So we think of it like a tree with roots and a trunk, and the leaves are sort of what's coming out now is all this suffering and difficulty and hardship. Or maybe you have a wonderful relationship with your body, but where do you want it to go when this tree flowers? So how do you want your relationship to be? Would you like to cultivate a relationship with your body where you have peace, where you have comfort and agency and you have passion and attuned self-care, and you experience your body as a subject instead of a thing from outside? That's the goal. So that's Reclaim Health. And the body story, like if you take the Be Body Positive Fundamentals, which is our basic course for everybody to sort of enter our world of the body positive, it's an 11-hour online course. You'll learn this model. So you'll start your body story. Then practice intuitive care. Self-care is the second competency, and that's about listening to the wisdom of your body. Like, are you hungry? What are you hungry for? When are you satisfied? So it's like we teach on this very practical, concrete level, starting with eating and exercise. Like, what kind of movement gives you joy? What are the circumstances that you're moving in that you can ever think of where you felt happy and alive? And for some people, it might not be since before middle school, right? That they felt free to inhabit their bodies and be outside and take up space and felt functional and like they had agency in the world, right? So we help to figure out on these really basic levels of hunger, satiety, movement, rest, and then apply that metaphor to everything in life. So like I had a client who said 3 months into therapy, she came in for bulimia. And at 3 months, she said, I've learned intuitive eating. I'll never throw up again. I understand how to eat intuitively. But now that I know how to eat intuitively, I realize I've made all the rest of my decisions in my life based on what other people thought I should do, completely disconnected from who I am. And now I realize I'm heading into a master's program in a career I'm not even interested in. So I was just trying to help people overcome eating disorders, but what I've learned is when people know how to eat intuitively and take care of themselves just on these fundamental levels, it's like one girl in 5th grade said, us girls who know how to eat intuitively, we start to know a whole lot about what we know about a whole lot. And which is a very simple way to express a complex feminist psychoanalytic idea about trusting the authority of our own experience and feeling confident in the world because we know ourselves. We know when we're hungry. We know what we're hungry for. We know what we experience as violence. We know what we experience as pleasure, right? And so that capacity for intuitive self-care has unlimited repercussions. It'll start a revolution. Like those girls who started knowing what they knew about a whole lot, they started telling the PE teacher in 5th grade, when we have our periods, we're not going to run a mile. Nice. And raising all kinds of hell. And it was just because they were listening to their bodies instead of him for a change.
Right.
And they were like, we're not doing it.
Yeah, that's fantastic to, foster that internal authority to listen to it. And I feel like that contributes to resilience where then you're able to carry this from context to context.
Right. Exactly. And then there's cultivate self-love, which is about the actual practice of building a quality of love inside. So even if you didn't get that enough from your caregivers, to be able to, as an adult, really, and even children can do this, reach inside to connect to a quality of love that comes right up from the earth into your body. And or however you imagine it, you could think of someone you love, a pet you love, a spiritual teacher, whatever will help you attune to this quality of love instead of moving towards your fears and strengthening fear. So literally choose love, and instead of indulging in your fears, because whatever you focus on will get bigger in your experience. And when there are fears like the critical voice or internalized violent aggressive messages that we hate you, you're too fat, nobody wants you, whatever those messages are, to instead of trying to shut down, like, let's just get high, I don't want to hear that nasty noise yelling at me, I'm just going to drink a beer, right? Instead, you turn towards those, because they're just parts of yourself now. And you ask those parts, dear critical voice, you've been attacking me all day about my thighs. What is it that you really, really need? Because I don't think it's about my thighs, right? But to recognize that it's a kind of internalized violence that needs care and compassion and kindness. And then it will transform from being a demon into an ally, something that will help you, because it feels loved, and it feels like, I was just trying to help you by telling you that your thighs are ugly and no one will ever love you. And I'm like, that doesn't really help me. It would help me if you would protect me against people who criticize my thighs instead of attacking me all day long.
Yeah. I feel like I have, and this is getting a little bit out of our context, but I feel like that is so useful in a lot of context. And so, like, I have issues with insomnia, and I have this negative voice constantly saying, "Hey, you're going to need to do this tomorrow. You're going to get in trouble at work if you don't do this. You don't do this." And so I end up focusing negatively on those fears. And I feel like the
Right.
explanation you gave, it can be fostered in the other direction. Hey, this is protecting
Exactly.
me.
Yeah, you can't make the bad noise go away, but you can turn towards it and bring a quality of kindness, like, dear, Brian part that's worrying all night long. What is it that you really need? Well, I could use a good night's rest, right? It's like, and what are your worries? Well, whatever the worries are, like, I'm worried people won't accept me and they think I'm an unproductive failure. Okay, so how can I support you and encourage you with those fears? Because that's clearly not what you're needing to address right now, since no, boss is shaking his finger at you. You're lying in your bed trying to go to sleep, right? And so just responding to those fearful parts and cultivating a quality of kindness and compassion and generosity, which is where the work around Kristen Neff's work on self-compassion is incredibly powerful and highly researched, effective a way of approaching the worries that we always have.
Hmm. And we were talking before we got going into the episode, before we started recording, we were talking about the difference between self compassion and what was the other one that you said, the
Self-esteem.
self esteem. Yeah. Do you want to touch on that? Because that really
Yeah.
hit me when we were talking earlier.
Well, you probably know, since you're an educator, that for the last 30 years, we've been trying to improve the self-esteem of children. And we try to improve the self-esteem by telling them all the ways they're good and telling them, like, you're good at math, you're good at this, you're good at that. That's why you're a good person. And so you don't need to be self-loathing. You're successful. And here's all of the ways. That whole approach, which we've spent millions of dollars on, has failed miserably, because this idea of a competitive self-esteem, of building our self-worth on a foundation of, I'm good because I'm good at this, I'm better than that person at that, I'm a fast runner, it's based on a competitive framework. So when we actually suffer, when we fail, when we get sick, when we lose a relationship, there ain't nothing there to support us, because you're not better at not being sick and not losing a relationship. It's like, clearly you're failing. And that's where this extreme perfectionism and competitiveness leads us down the tubes that's so connected to eating disorders and body image problems. And so the alternative to this self-esteem, this competitive self-worth foundation is self-compassion, which comes from a 2,500-year-old psychology from who I consider the greatest psychologist of all time, which was Buddha, who was fundamentally interested. He wasn't interested in cataloging people's psychology like we are in psychology today. He was just interested in how do the humans suffer and how might we suffer less. And he made a scientific study of that. And through trial and error discovered we can cultivate qualities inside of ourselves that transform our experience, like love, self-compassion, equanimity, joy. And these are antidotes to what he called the hindrances, like fear, anger, attachment, preoccupation, right? So all of these things, like this competitive idea of climbing the caste ladder endlessly. If I just have one more activity after school, maybe I'll have a better college app, and then I'll go to a better college, and then I'll get a better job. This endless climbing of the social ladder, which is so fundamental in a capitalist society, which is built on climbing, right? So this idea of cultivating self-compassion, then when we suffer, what we do is three things. Turn towards ourselves with some awareness. Oh, I'm suffering. So we're not getting high. We're not turning on the TV. We're not checking out. We're making contact, mindfulness. Ah, I'm sad. I'm really sad about that cat that I saw get run over this morning, or whatever you're sad about, right? And then bringing a quality of kindness to it. Oh, Lizzie, that was upsetting. I'm so sorry. And then we imagine our common humanity. So there's three parts of self-compassion. So mindfulness, kindness, and then common humanity. Other people have had losses like this. I feel connection and community with them. So it's not isolating like self-esteem, right? Because with self-esteem, you have to be better than others. So you don't want to tell them any of your methods. And if you fail, you don't want to let them know, because then they'll think less of you. So when you fail, you're alone. But with self-compassion, you join everyone who suffers like you do. So it's a far more useful resource. And we don't have to depend on, millions of Buddhists who've practiced over the last 2,500 years. We could instead go to the research of Kristin Neff. Hundreds of studies on the benefits of self-compassion. If you just Google Kristin Neff, self-compassion versus self-esteem, then you'll find dozens of articles. There's just a tremendous amount of research on this one aspect of Buddhism, which is extremely fruitful, and all the neuropsychologists are onto it.
Yeah, well, I love that explanation of some of this Buddhist psychology that is connected to the body positive and the be body positive model. And I also liked how you connected self-compassion to community.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Self-compassion builds connectedness. It doesn't separate us out like a competitive framework does. So right. It's just the difference between, it's like when my daughter was a child, she loved the Hunger Games, and she wanted to put on the Hunger Games with her friends. And so I helped her, and we would go to a big park, and they would all get all these kind of weapons that were fake, but they would play a game where they would fight until only one man was standing. It was a completely competitive, capitalistic, hierarchical kind of approach, right? That's what the whole Hunger Games was about. It's a critique of. And we did it 3 times, and all 3 times, everybody in the group, except my daughter, who often was the winner, were crying. They hated the game. It was miserable. Everybody lost. Nobody helped. People they thought were friends didn't cooperate because it was a last man standing, completely competitive, hierarchical game. Why did I help her put that on 3 times, even though it led to tears and misery and the parents criticized me? Because I wanted her to learn about capitalism. So at the end of the game, when everybody be sitting and crying, I would just ask, so, Uma, how do you think this structure of game is working in terms of building community and connectedness and support and people feeling happy together? And she said, it's terrible for that. And I said,
Yeah. Yeah.
so it is, isn't it? What else could we do with this group of people that won't lead to everybody feeling in tears and alienated at the end? And she was like, well, I can think of a lot of things. And so that was the next few years of building community and doing fun things together instead of this competitive, hierarchical, fight to the end approach, which I just thought she needs to learn about this. And so do all these 25 kids. They all were like, that's why I hate it, because nobody helps each other. And I'm like, yeah, a cooperative game would probably be more fun. Let's try.
Yeah.
Let's try that.
Yeah, and it's so interesting because we live in. I mean, there's just no escape from this capitalistic society that we live in, and it is make it, succeed or fail, and
But
that
there
is
is an escape. But there is an escape. And that's what, to me, the body positive represents.
yeah,
That if we can help people find self-love and body acceptance and community that is not competitive and hierarchical, but that is cooperative and sharing, then people can feel hopeful about the future instead of feeling like it's a dog eat dog world and we're all going to go down with climate chaos, right? But instead that us humans, we're not only competitive. Darwin was true about the competitive part, but he kind of missed the whole cooperative mycelium in the under the earth, and the ways that we are actually all cooperating in nature. And that's how we've stayed afloat. The humans are very good at that. Like, we can do that. We just need a different approach. It really needs to be more intuitive, more connected to the body and connected to the land, more connected to nature.
yeah. Now I'm seeing how the body positive is so great for mobilizing people to go out and do good in a cooperative fashion. There's going to be a lot more, just better benefits that way with that cooperative
Yeah.
approach.
Well, and in my view, it's much more important work for me to be involved in work around climate chaos and really addressing the climate crisis that we're in and taking care of the land and the horrible extinctions that are going on. But to me, the most effective way to do that work is to mobilize hundreds and thousands of young people to be not preoccupied with perfecting every little detail about their body, which is going to bear no fruit at all for anyone. It's just going to keep them in a narrow little box, completely disempowered. But instead, if they could love their bodies, which is an extension of the earth itself, and connect to their own nature, they're going to connect to nature. Then they're going to realize, oh my God, there's so much we're losing. I love this earth. And it's out of that grief and love that they'll be mobilized to make change. And I'm not old enough I'm too old to change the whole world. But if I can get hundreds and hundreds of young people mobilized, then I feel hopeful.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. That's fantastic. The Be Body Positive model has a lot of great stuff with it, and you mentioned the 5 competencies. I want to ask you, how did you and your co-founder decide, or whoever planned it out, to call them competencies, and why did you choose that word?
Because we're really interested in what is sort of part of a human being's natural development. Like what is as we become more of who we are, what are the qualities that we really love and admire, that we really want to, a competency, I think of it, it's like something learnable, but then once you have it, you have it. Like if you know how to ride a bike, you know how to ride a bike. If you know how to read, you know how to read, right? And so we just want these 5 competencies. I didn't mention the last 2, which is to declare your own authentic beauty, which is to really stand in your own beauty and recognize it and portray it and be confident in it. And then build community, which is just about creating a world of people who subscribe to these values of listening inside and trusting each other in relationship and building cooperative society and resisting messages that are, deadening, where we're just feel like checking out because everything is so grim, right? And instead staying connected with community. So So competency, it's something you can have. It stays with you. But of course, it's always alive and changing. You might one day have a great quality of self-love and the next day have a horrible bad body attack, right? Just hate your body. But it's just learning skills to dig your way out, to find your way back. It's not, you don't arrive. It's not like now I'm body positive. It's just that
Yeah.
you know how to dig yourself out of a bad situation.
Yeah, they're skills. They're learnable. And when you learn
Yeah.
them, you got them, and then they help you with whatever situation.
But it's like a guide. It steers you where you want to go. And so, like when I'm working clinically with a client, I'll wonder which one of the competencies are they weak in, and
Mm.
that's the one I'm going to try to focus on in our work. If they have a really
Nice.
nasty, critical voice and no soothing, kind, nurturing voice, like we can work on cultivate self-love. If they're still thinking, I'm going to drive my weight down 10 pounds below my natural weight, then I'm going to explain to them just the science of health at every size, that our bodies want to land at a certain weight. And if we just eat in a peaceful way and exercise in a peaceful way, we're going to maintain our natural weight. And then we need to recognize and declare our own beauty at that weight, which might not fit the social ideal, probably won't, right? And so to be able to accept ourselves as we are, they're just ways of being resilient.
Yeah. Yeah. So for those listeners out there, I was going to do you want to repeat the 5 competencies?
Yeah, so this is the Be Body Positive model. You can learn a lot more about it at thebodypositive.org, at thebodypositive.org. Reclaim health, practice intuitive self-care, cultivate a fierce quality of self-love, declare your own authentic beauty, and build body positive community. And you can learn this model in the fundamentals course. You learn it in your own way, but you get to hear from a lot of body positive facilitators who talk about like what that competency meant to them. So you get a lot of story in the process.
Oh,
So
that's
there's lots of
fantastic.
video of them talking about when I discovered self-love, and what their stories were. And if you love it and you love the model and you want to teach it to your friends, then you take the whole facilitator training and you get the curriculum. And then you can start teaching curriculum in middle school, high school, college, adults. A lot of treatment professionals teach our curriculum.
Yeah.
It's a
Oh
lot of
gosh,
fun.
Elizabeth, it's a lot of fun and doing a lot of good for the world. I liked how you took it down a notch in terms of, okay, I want to help out with the environmental crisis going on.
Right.
How can I do that? And maybe you don't have the background education on necessarily hitting
In
those things,
science, right.
but the
Yeah.
part down here of everyone coming together, how do we do that? The body positive approach,
Yeah.
fantastic. I mean, you're doing a
Just
lot
to
of good.
mobilize, just to mobilize people outside of our own, taking all of the difficulties of the world and our fears and anxiety about the future and getting into a loop inside of ourselves instead of being able to have the resources we need to take action in the world, which is what the world needs very much right now, is especially young people of all ages, to be engaged in and not caught up in self-loathing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and I especially love that 5th competency of the community aspect.
Yeah, yeah.
That's
Yeah,
really
it's
fantastic.
essential. I don't think it's possible to get well in an environment where everybody's crazy. You need to bring a few people along with you. And
Yes.
so just teaching, I had a father say to me recently, since my daughter overcame her eating disorder in your care, we've become a body positive family. And he said, and it saved me from a compulsive form of exercising I've been doing my whole life. And
Oh,
now I feel
wow.
I have so much more joy in my physical activity because I'm not doing it in this really grim way. And it's all because my daughter taught me the body positive. I learned it from her, which
Yeah,
was great.
that's
She was only in
fantastic.
7th grade and she was like, why do you exercise like that? You're miserable. Why don't you do it for joy and pleasure? And he was like, I don't know. Why don't
Yeah.
I?
Oh gosh, that's
You know?
fantastic. That's fantastic. Going back to the start of our conversation, the Body Positive started up. You and your co-founder started in 1996.
Yeah,
1996. So we got about 27, 26, 27 years going right now. And
yeah. And the
uh,
Body Positive incorporated 25 years ago. So we've been steady for a long stretch. And And our focus is really about training leaders, and it's all available online because of COVID. We created everything, got everything online, actually right before COVID started, thank goodness,
Hmm.
so that people in Constantinople and Nepal and Argentina can learn our model. But the exciting thing that's coming out next is we're creating a K-8 curriculum.
Oh, really?
Yeah, so teachers will teach kids from kindergarten through eighth grade through very arty, experiential, very somatic oriented curriculum. They'll teach our 5 competencies to little ones.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, getting it started earlier with younger ages is
Really
just
great.
fantastic. And so, is that going to be also a resource that can be purchased through your website,
Yeah, it
thebodypositive.org?
will. We'll pilot it for efficacy in the fall. But if people are interested in it, we're looking for middle schools right now who will try it out.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, they can have it for free if they want to try it out as part of a pilot.
Oh, really? Really? Okay.
Yeah.
And with the Be Body Positive model, how much has it been researched and kind of tested out?
Question.
Yeah.
Good question. We've had a lot of research. We've had research at Cornell and at Stanford and University of Pennsylvania. There's 2 gals from the University of Pennsylvania who just did a study where they brought our model into a half a dozen high schools in Philadelphia with really big cohort of very diverse kids. And they trained leaders, and then the leaders ran groups with them. So they reached a lot of young people. And our model transforms people's relationship to their body. And they do cultivate self-compassion, which, as you can see from Kristen Neff's research, promotes a lot of positive qualities of resilience. They are less critical and judgmental and preoccupied with their bodies. They're better able to eat intuitively and get away from dieting and restricting and all the eating disordered behaviors. They tend to feel more socially connected because they're less, anxious and preoccupied with themselves. Um, and at the Stanford research, it showed that they benefited in all these ways at the end of the 8-week group, but 8 months later, they had benefited even more.
Oh,
So
nice.
even another 8 months later, or I see generally in a year after learning our model, that people's whole worldview has been more integrated and transformed, and they're in even better shape a year later than they were when they first learned the model, which is good. We like to have a good outcome right at the end, but usually people have diminishing returns after the end, right? And ours, it increased.
Wow.
So
Wow.
there's a
Well, this
lot.
is really powerful that the research is objectively showing that. I mean, this is something that it would be fantastic to be adopted. The K-8,
Right.
is it curriculum, would you call it? Or,
Yeah, it's a
yeah.
curriculum, so it's lessons for each year. So there's 20 lessons that the teachers will teach in 10 weeks. So 2 half-hour lessons a week, and we have a research team from the University of West Virginia who's going to be studying what the impact is, how the teachers, basically it's efficacy and feasibility. We'll study in the fall how it works to implement this curriculum in the classroom, and then we'll research and what's the impact on the kids.
Nice. I like it a lot. I feel like I should homeschool my kids and just adopt that curriculum. They're both going to be in middle school
Absolutely.
here next year. Right now,
Oh,
my stepdaughter's in 7th grade and my
yeah.
stepson is in 5th grade, so they are in some
Yep, middle
formative years
school it
right
is.
now.
Okay, well, you tell me your middle school. I'll reach out and see if they want to pilot the curriculum. We could
Yeah,
definitely use
yeah.
some. Yeah,
I'll
then
email
it'll
that to
hit
you.
your kids and they'll be like, the weirdest thing happened today. I don't know why we were talking about this, but this is what happened today in sixth grade. So it's
Yeah.
sixth,
Oh,
seventh, eighth is what we'll pilot first of the whole curriculum.
okay. Okay. Yeah. Well, that's where my stepson's starting next year, and stepdaughter will be
Awesome.
in 8th grade. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, they could definitely benefit from it. The
Yeah.
activities are fantastic. We pulled together this really diverse, brilliant bunch of educators to write the curriculum. And so they are teaching in Newark and California, all over the country. And they came together all online, and we created this, these are hundreds of activities, right? Because it's 8 years, 20 per year. And uh, they've made it very somatic. So they do, theater and art and music and spoken word and all kinds of ways of teaching, all the way from kindergarten to 8th grade.
Oh, I love it. I love it. The body positive is just doing all kinds of great stuff. And so to kind of be concluding our conversation on this episode, where do you see the body positive? You said uh, what was the terminology used 25 years ago that it, um, yeah,
Started.
started. And so
Incorporated. Yeah.
incorporate. Thank you. That's what I was looking for. Where do you see it in, say, 5 to 10 years?
What I would love to see is that the body positive curriculum is institutionalized in schools, that the schools have recognized that how children inhabit their bodies is really just the fundamental part of social emotional education, that's where it all starts, that they can connect to their body and learn to attune and have good self-care, that it really starts there, and that it builds in the social justice aspect of really recognizing and accepting the diversity of human bodies, both in size and shape and in all the other ways we show up, which the curriculum is a lot about, and that it's institutionalized across the country, because we don't want children dying of eating disorders, and eating disorders are the leading psychiatric disorder that leads to death.
Mm.
There's a high proportion of deaths by eating disorders in this country, and we can totally prevent that. It's very preventable if we can steer kids away from all of the risk factors associated with it.
Well, then hopefully maybe in 20 years it's at the international level.
Yeah, and at the international level would be lovely. I mean, we do see a lot of our language and ideas coming out in popular culture, and we just have to make sure that the advertising industry doesn't co-opt them to sell a diet, for example, and to stay with our grassroots level of really making change in the hearts and minds of children, and changing the way society works so that there's more equity and kindness going around, so that people can inhabit their bodies and get on to the work of taking care of each other and this earth.
Yeah.
So that's what I hope we'll see in 10 years. We need a lot more change than what the body positive can do in the next year. This is sort of the 10 years that are going to make a lot of difference in human history. So we all need to be focusing on cooperation and kindness and equity.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I like how you really interrelated, connected everything up, talking about social justice and talking about, messaging and talking about self-love, and then also talking about doing good for this world, helping with the environment. There's so many, this is all interrelated. It's all.
Well, and if you want to help people come more connected to the land, this is the land, right? Our bodies, we are nature. We're just another animal running around on the planet. And so to this Cartesian idea that we're separate and then there's nature, that is fundamentally the problem we have with our thinking. So coming back to, this is Earth, and I need to take care of it. And then we realize, and all this is Earth too, right? All the rest of the beings and the planet. So it starts here. We have to teach children to connect to their own nature and then to connect to the Earth. And they naturally do. We just need to not get them disrupted in the process of educating them.
Yeah. That disconnection of humans from nature is really problematic. And it's written into some of our major congressional acts, such as the Wilderness Act passed in 1964, that says wilderness should not be inhabited by people, but people are nature.
Exactly.
And it's when we're disconnecting that, it's not going to help people, foster conservation values and ethic.
No, it's a weird idea. No, this is nature. This is wilderness.
Yes, exactly. This
so
is wilderness.
Then just go outside in the backyard and be with wilderness, right?
Yeah.
It's all the same, whether it's protected or not. This is all nature.
Well, you got me thinking though, Elizabeth, we need to create a shirt that says, "This is wilderness."
Yes, this is wilderness. Take care of it.
Yeah,
Make
there
a
you
park.
go. Add that in. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, this
I
is
love
wilderness. Take care of it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Elizabeth, this has been a fantastic conversation. I'm so grateful that you came on and discussed the body positive on All Bodies Outside. I think that the mission of the podcast, the mission of the body positive is very aligned, strongly aligned. And so this was just a fantastic episode, a lot of great information that you provided. And you're doing a lot of great work that just, I mean, who knows how far the ripple effect goes. And that's fantastic to
I'm,
see.
I'm so grateful to you. I love your idea of your podcast. I think it's brilliant. It is so connected to our ideas. And I hope people will go to thebodypositive.org and take our fundamentals and just learn this for themselves. And so that they can feel in their own bodies, what are these ideas and how do they land with me?
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you re-mentioned the website there, thebodypositive.org, so people can go get some more information. Okay, well, we'll call it an episode here, and I'm going to throw on that outro music.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.